Well, good morning, Vivian. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
And thanks for being here. I was so excited when I saw that you were part of the Chloe Capital cohort. And of course, we have some of the members of Chloe Capital in common. But I was even more excited when I just cold reached out to you and said, "Hey, would you come on the show and tell us your story?" And you were like, "Absolutely." So thanks for that, Vivian.
Of course, I'm a fan of cold outreach. So, a well-crafted cold outreach is, a dear, close and near and dear to my heart.
It can work, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Vivian, let's do this first before we jump into all the great things that you're doing at Rise and all the experience that you've had, which is a very eclectic experience. I like it. I like the very, traveled path that you've taken that so many of us have taken. But would you just please introduce yourself to the folks listening right now, Vivian?
Sure. My name is Vivian Chen. I am the founder and CEO of Rise. Rise is an AI job search platform that hopefully is making a tedious process something more joyful.
And it is tedious, right? I mean, anybody can attest. I was unfortunately on the beach for about a year and searching for my next opportunity. It's hard out there, and things are still kind of pretty volatile, aren't they, Vivian?
Yes.
Yeah,
Over the last few years, it's really been a very tumultuous market.
yeah,
Since COVID, I think we've seen some of the biggest shifts in the world of work.
yeah,
Initially when people started working remotely, and then there was the phenomenon of the Great Resignation,
yes.
and now it's kind of the reverse of that, where people call it the Great Stay. Lots of layoffs, unemployment, and uncertainty, just given the general macroeconomic environment. As a platform, we have sort of seen it all since, from the COVID era all the way till now. And our goal has always been, how do we support job seekers? Because we know
Mhm.
that process that everyone has to go through, because everyone needs a paycheck and a way of, paying for their daily lives. Work
Sure.
is such an important part of our lives, but the process of finding work is seriously broken.
It's the whole right. Finding a job is a full time job, and it's really really challenging, isn't it?
Yeah.
Work in an academic setting, as you're aware, and we've got a lot of students who are about 45 days from graduation, and it's going to be very interesting as that yet another cohort of job seekers enters the market, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, you've had this transition to entrepreneurship like many of the folks that we've talked about. You had roles at L'Oreal, which is a big name brand that everybody I think recognizes, even if you're not in the beauty industry. But you made this leap into entrepreneurship, Vivian. Was that something that you always kind of knew you were destined to kind of move into entrepreneurship? Did that happen through happenstance? I'm just kind of curious as to your transition, Vivian.
Yeah, I think, I've always sort of been a maker and a creator,
Mm,
someone who
mm,
likes to make things from nothing, whether it's painting, artwork, or,
mm,
even leading an organization in college. I think there's always this like activator, initiator kind of within
mhm.
me. So, it wasn't quite defined as being an entrepreneur, I guess,
Right.
earlier on. But, when I decided to start my own company, the journey from L'Oreal and everything else sort of to see makes sense.
Yeah.
I had what I call millennial FOMO, which is around the 2014, 2015, even 2016 era, when Silicon Valley was booming and,
Gaming. Yeah.
working in a very traditional Fortune 500 cubicle. And I had a little sliver of sunlight, the kind that you can imagine in Manhattan. And all I could think about every day was, how can I touch the lives of millions of people? And
Yeah.
friends were talking about all these disruptive products and companies they were joining that were upstarts. And I wanted a piece of that. And that's what ultimately led me from a big corporate job to the startup journey, initially into a job at a tech smaller startup, which I applied to over 200 jobs in order to get. So that's
Wow.
kind of, yeah, that was one of the foundations why Rise is so important to me, because
Mhm,
I know what it feels like to be rejected, ghosted, to feel so much of your persona tied into work, and
mhm.
the process of finding something that is worthy of you. Yeah, and that the whole process kind of, you don't know where the journey leads, but ultimately, it looking back, it all makes sense and connects the dots.
I can tell now that you said you were an artist. It really starts to make sense, Vivian, in the conversations we had, and even just the visual that you painted of the sliver of sunlight coming through the buildings into your cubicle. Like we can all relate to that, right? So, you mentioned 200 jobs. Um, Rise is really aiming to make the job search more efficient, more enjoyable, right? I mean, I know that's a big part of what you stand behind is sort of the joy associated with Rise. Talk to us a little bit about Rise and
Yes.
what you're looking to do, Vivian.
Of course. So when I remember when I was looking for jobs, I would go on these traditional job boards,
Hmm.
and it would just be a list of jobs, and I felt so alone, like I was the only one in the world in which that faced this level of rejection and the overwhelm and the despair, sitting there forcing myself to apply to you know hundreds of jobs
Yeah,
over and over and over again, filling out the same forms, writing in my name, editing the lines on my resume, chewing over every word. And all of it, was put with so much care and effort because, I cared about what
sure.
I
Hmm.
did and the work that I was doing. Um,
Hmm.
and there was no sense of community. There was no sense of, this as a journey to discover what it is that I'm interested in, right? Like, I think the career search process should really be a self reflective journey. I remember at that time, I had to seek out outside resources. I read books, I talked to career coaches, I did all sorts of personality assessments in order to understand what it is that I wanted, what kind of job, what kind of company would be the one that would make me the most fulfilled, the most
Hmm.
purposeful. And these are the types of memories as well as really experiences that we
Sure.
bring into the Rise platform. So I mentioned community, right? Making people feel like that you are not alone in this process. Job search at the end of the day is, you have to look for a job. There is that
Right.
part which, it is what it is, but how you feel during the process is something that we can change. So when you join the community, I tend to describe it as an intimate dinner party. So a direct contrast to how you might feel on a traditional job board. And Rise is the host, so it's like Richard, come on in, come on in. Let
Yeah.
me show you around, right? And my cat is the onboarding ambassador, so it actually feels like when you're entering my house and my cat goes up to you
And
and
greet you. Yeah.
exactly takes you around. Here's the kitchen, right? And it kind of feels like that. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
let me show you, these are the folks that you should meet. Here are the companies that we can match your values and what you stand for. Here's a discussion that people have around work-life balance, right?
Mm.
So all of these things to make people feel like it's part of a greater conversation, a discovery of who they are. And recently, we also started launching a lot more partnerships as well as
Nice.
AI tools to help people, take that step into discovering more about themselves.
Mm.
So things like coaching and courses, as well as assessments to help you. Some of the things that I've experienced when I was looking for a job of, how do you approach this so that you feel like you have more control in the process?
When I lost the last corporate job I ever had before I entered academia, when I lost the last corporate job I had at the end of 2023, I did get, a few months of outplacement service and executive coaching. But to your point, I don't think, Vivian, I ever felt more alone during that year plus that I was trying to find my new opportunity. And
Yes.
I have a very large network. I know you have a very large network, and people do sort of put themselves out there and reach out to their network and sort of implore their network, hey, I'm looking, I'm trying to find something. And what I got back was a lot of, hey, I'm here for you, let me know what you need. But
Yeah.
the onus was always put back on you or me to tell people what it was that I needed, rather than a little bit more of sort of the those people kind of stepping forward. Talk to me a little bit about sort of, you mentioned AI for a second,
Yeah.
and what you're doing to kind of enhance the job search, enhance the experience on your platform. Talk to me a little bit about that and what you're doing there, Vivian.
Of course. So I think at this point, I've probably done thousands of resume reviews as well
Mm.
as one on one conversations with job seekers. And again, one of the things that I notice is that people are pretty bad at, talking about their accomplishments or
Yeah.
feeling like, they don't know how to put it into the right words or context to make it really stand out. And,
Mm.
me as a third party, perspective coming in, and also having seen so many resumes as
Resumes.
well as applications, it's very easy for me to tease out those
Mm,
nuances, like what makes that job, that company, that experience special. And what we've done is actually we've built out an AI tool to help replicate that
mm,
process. And we've actually uploaded, tons of the notes that I've had, the process I've done with helping
cool.
others with resume and cover letter into this AI copilot, so that now, I can be at multiple places at once, or the
Mm,
process that we've used can be at multiple places at once. The goal here is to make sure that people put their best foot forward and that you
mm,
don't undersell yourself. So taking into the context of the job, the company, and what you're looking for, how do you position yourself so that you
mm,
are the best candidate? Your story makes sense in this context. And
mm.
uh, a lot of times, people definitely customize their resume and their cover letter for each individual job.
Right.
And with AI, one of the things that we can do is suggest different ways in which you can tailor both your cover letter and resume for these jobs with your approval, of course, for you now then to take out that onus and a lot of that, hey, I didn't think about that, but and just give you more ideas and suggestions.
Sure, that's wonderful. Can you talk a little bit, Vivian? I don't want to skip over this because I think it's important. How does the process work? So for someone who says, "Okay, I'm going to join Rise tomorrow. I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and I'm going to join Rise." How does the process work for them?
Yeah. So super easy. What you do is you upload your resume and cover letter,
Mhm.
and you can decide whether you want to, how deep you want to go into the customization process. So we have controls for you to monitor that, and we'll send you a daily digest of the jobs that we find matches the most to your profile and your interests.
That's
And
great.
before you apply to the job, if you have set a setting of like suggest recommendations for you, we'll show you what bullet points in your resume and your cover letter and how to position yourself. And once you
Mm,
approve that, great. Now you have a version of that resume done. You don't have to sit there and edit the same Word document or, the Canva document, the whatever it is document 1,000 times. And that's
yeah.
something that I remember, what version am I using now?
Yes.
Am I using my product marketing resume? Am I using my brand marketing? Where's that bullet point? All of those details, you're now able to have a much better organization of.
It's so amazing because I work with a lot of students, as you know, and you've worked with students in the past and present, and I want to talk about that, of course,
Yeah.
and the versions of the resumes. To your point, now that they have, this is my marketing resume, this is my general operations resume, this is my sort of office chief of staff resume, and to your point, to constantly trying to curate and update those, it's so overwhelming, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
part of the process that drains people.
Mm,
Looking at jobs, reading the job description, finding more information about the company. I think that's what people should do because it's the discovery process. And
right,
then figuring out your storytelling, one aspect to think about it is it's really no different than something that's like a grammar checker, right? Because it's
right.
there to assist you and to help you to figure out and tease out what it is about you that resonates the most with this job. It's kind of like having your personal career coach just sitting there on your shoulder and letting you remind yourself of all the things that you've done. That's one of the things that I do with job seekers too. Sometimes they'll
Mm.
tell me really detailed things about a job that they did. I was like, hold on, let's zoom out for a second. What Tell me about this company. What
Yeah,
size are they? How
yeah.
many people are on the team? Let me know a little bit more about the context here so that make sure that when the hiring manager or the recruiter that's only spending 7 seconds on your resume, that they're actually able to pick out the pieces that are important, relevant, without glossing over a giant block of text that actually nothing jumps out.
Right. I really want to double click for a second too on what you just said, Vivian, about like it is supposed to be like a grammar checker in the sense that you should be spending the majority of your time telling your story, building your story, creating your authentic story,
Yeah,
and also to your point, spending a bunch of time investigating and researching this company. Is this company the right fit for me? Am I going to grow here? Am I going to be successful here? And
yeah,
if you're spending this exorbitant amount of time just on your resume and your cover letter, you are shortchanging yourself the opportunity to create your story, like you said, and put it in a way on your resume that is very eye catching to someone versus something that they're just not going to read. That's great.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you've earned a lot of accolades. Brand name companies, Forbes, Cartier, J.P. Morgan, Barclays. How has that started to impact your company, your growth? And I'd also love to get into some of your conversation, a little bit of conversation, Vivian, about you as a leader and how you kind of view yourself at the helm of the organization.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for acknowledging a lot of those, accolades, but a lot of it came from just pure hustle.
I love it. The
Whenever
hustle
there
culture.
is anything that has, a competition or a call
Mm,
for action, I make sure I throw my hat into the ring because as a
mm,
female founder, it's really important that, and as a former marketer, I realize the power of having other people recognize your work as well to
mhm.
build legitimacy. Because Rise, as a company, as a startup, we are the up and comers.
Yeah,
The big players like LinkedIn and Indeed, they've been around for a decade. So in order for us to make some noise, I really needed to find avenues, in which not only is my company and the product standing out, but people I can have a bigger reach than what I have just simply with my team and my community. So
sure.
tapping into others who will champion my voice and my vision has been really important to me.
Mm, I love that. And you have had a little bit of a unique funding story, right? A lot of the female entrepreneurs that we talk to have also had very unique funding stories. We know there's such a high barrier for female entrepreneurs and the work that they try to do to get funded and the higher burden of proof. Would you give us just a little bit of some background, Vivian, on what your funding story has been like?
Sure. I love telling this story
Yeah.
because it's kind of the perfect mix of like serendipity and never giving up. So I think I, had my first inkling to do fundraising around the third week of February, second week of February, 2020. And right
Yeah,
before this,
perfect time.
perfect timing, right? Right before this, I messaged a former instructor of mine
Mhm,
who led a marketing class. And I realized that she was a partner at a VC fund. So I
mm,
emailed her and say, hey, I have an idea for a company. I've done a little bit of testing. We've had some pretty good progress. I'd love to chat more with you about it. And she's like, great, let's grab a coffee on this date. And that was the mid-February date.
mhm.
Unfortunately, she's in San Francisco and I'm in New York.
New York. Yep, yep,
And
yep.
I wasn't about to give up this opportunity. So I said, and this was before, Zoom was, the
All
mode
the
that
rage. Yeah.
everyone met on, right? So I was like, no, I am not going to give up this chance. So I said yes. And I traveled to San Francisco and met with
Amazing.
her, but also around 30 other VCs as
Yeah,
well.
make it worth your while to be out there, right?
Exactly. And the conversations were great. Unfortunately, I came back to New York. It was the first week of March
Mm,
2020. And all the conversations that I had out West basically disappeared.
yeah.
And for the rest of 2020, it was a struggle. I, pull myself as many times as possible. I try to resuscitate a lot of the conversations, but the momentum just wasn't there
Wasn't there.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
The world was changing.
Mm,
And what ended up happening was I said, forget about it. I'm not going to do the fundraising thing anymore.
right.
That's just not going to be in the cards for me. So I am just going to focus on revenue. And I am
Mm,
going to, and this was around the time when I was also freelancing and using the revenue that I was generating freelancing to pay for my team as well as any of the operations for the company. And I also joined a network and a community for startup founders, very early stage startup
that's
founders.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and one of the sessions that we had was supposed to be a practice pitch day.
Hmm.
And I showed up. I didn't have a pitch because I wasn't pitching. I've already given up.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, yeah, you weren't pitching, so why would you have a pitch? Yeah.
Not at all, right? And then the first person goes, she had a deck and she was very polished. She was going through her deck, and I was sitting there like, crap, I have nothing. Second person goes, same thing, super polished, have their pitch down. And there were three more people before me. And I was like, I got to get something together so I don't embarrass myself in front of these people. So for the next three pitches, I basically just sat there and wrote out the outline for what I was going to say. And
Outstanding.
yeah, and I think because I didn't have the time to overthink and I really just,
Hmm.
hit on the bullet points that were the most important things, the highlights. At the end of my pitch, the VC in the room said, "That was the best pitch I've heard. Like we should chat after this." And then someone else in that room happens to be an angel investor, and he
Mm,
DM'd me and said, "Hey, I heard your pitch, and I love to put a check in. How do I invest?" this kickstarted a whole snowball process. And, I reached out to a couple of other mentors. I said, holy cow, like I have
What's
no
happening?
idea what's happening. All these people are like talking about giving me checks. What do I do? And the mentor started coming onto my side as well, saying that, hey, we watched you and we know what you're
Mhm.
capable of. Count
Mm.
us in as well. I have another check in. Or they'll
Wow.
say, like I am a scout for a VC fund. Not only am I coming in, but I'm bringing that VC fund in as well. And it
Right.
kind of started going from
Amazing.
there. And I didn't have a deck. I just had my outline, all these things. And that's how I started my fundraising. It's this
Amazing
feeling,
story.
yeah, and it's this
Yeah.
feeling of when you least expect it, it sort of comes to you. And
Hmm.
the feeling, and one of my mentors, I remember very clearly telling me, this is how it should feel when you're fundraising. That
Yeah.
the process feels like, people are pushing you. It's the pull, right? And the
Right.
push that you feel. And it shouldn't feel like there's so much resistance, which
That's
is very different given the era that I was in versus now. But I think
sure.
it speaks to a lot of just like when you feel momentum,
Mm.
you really do feel it.
That's great. I went to a presentation yesterday on sort of the neuroscience of leadership and innovation. And there was this portion that was really talking about like that fight or flight stress and how, yes, it's bad for you, but in short bursts, it can produce tremendous creativity, right? So
Oh, yeah. In this case, like under pressure was something I just, able to pull that out in probably 5 minutes.
you are a very, very busy person, Vivian. You teach MBA level marketing courses besides leading Rise. There's some board activity you mentioned already, community activity that you're a part of. How do you blend your entrepreneurship? How does it inform your teaching? Vice versa. Sitting in a very similar spot myself, I love to talk about these types of topics with folks.
Yeah. I actually think, when things sort of align and all complement each other, it actually
Mm,
makes all aspects of your work better.
mm,
One of the reasons that I was interested in teaching was I realized that my team is very young and,
yeah.
a lot of them are like me, are career changers or
Mm,
people who don't come from the industry or are very early in their career. So I almost have to teach them the fundamentals of not only marketing, but business operations, startups, everything from scratch. So, and I had so much joy from that because I can
yeah.
see the improvements that they're making in their careers. And so, when the opportunity came up to teach an MBA level course, in the back of my head, I was like, I've kind of already covered all these with my team.
On the daily, yeah.
Exactly. And so, now I just get to do it at a more formal platform.
Yeah,
And
fun.
yeah, and that's kind of what happened, and I think I brought a lot of that, like practical and real life experience that I've had with building a company, building
Mhm.
Rise into the marketing course that I was teaching. And even to this day, like a lot of the students from that first class, first cohort, are still in touch with me. They still text
That's
me and
wonderful.
ask me for advice on job search about,
Mhm.
like conversations they're having at work. And, it makes me feel very, very proud of the fact that I was able to, be a small part of these students' journey and career story, and that they still come to me whenever they're in need of support.
I think most students would say that it is the adjuncts that come in with a lot of the real industry experience that tend to be some of the most impactful, right, instructors that they can have. And certainly, it's not to say that they can't learn a lot from their tenured academic professional professors as well, because there's theory and there's all these other really important things that you have to learn and understand. But I do believe that most students would say, it is the adjuncts that come in from the real world with the real world experience. And I think the fact that you still have these connections to those students kind of is a testament to that. And they still want your insights
Yes.
and they
Yes.
still want your mentorship. And maybe even in some cases, they still looking for a little bit of your approval, right? So,
That's
which is
for
really
sure
fun.
there. And
Yeah.
I joke, it's like, okay, you can call me Vivian now.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, it's okay now. We're out of the classroom.
Yeah.
Uh, you mentioned that career changers and some of the folks that are part of your organization now and yourself, and I would put myself into this bucket now as a significant career changer. It's tough, right? It's tough when you are thinking about trying to change career. Maybe you're a professional that's been in a certain space for a long time. pivoting, navigating into this transition successfully, how do you approach when individuals come to you and say, Vivian, help me, I want to make a career change, I need to make a career change?
Yeah. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart because it feels like with the rapid changing world, every 6 months, there's a realignment of
Yeah.
where the opportunities are. I just read an article this morning saying that engineering might be dead.
Yeah.
Some of the foremost experts that used to vouch for computer science and engineering are saying, hey, maybe those are not the subject matters that are going to be the ones leading the future.
Right.
Ones that we actually used to dismiss are the ones that are going to thrive in this AI economy, and
Yeah.
it just feels so different all the time, right? So we do have to be adaptable, and that's
Mhm.
what makes us humans resilient and humans.
Yes.
And when I think about changing a career, it's like anything else. It's you have to start small. So
Yeah.
one of the things that like you don't have the experience. If you can't get the job, you can't get the job if you don't have the experience, right?
Right.
Sometimes it does feel like a chicken and the egg problem. And what I recommend to people is look for commonalities with your skill sets of what you're doing now. And
Mm.
can you articulate the story of how those skills would apply to the new job or industry? So
Mm.
that's one. The second thing is to uh, uncover opportunities, however small, that would enable you to have a transition in this new field. For example,
Mm.
if someone wants to go from marketing to sales, right?
Mhm.
Is there a smaller startup that you could volunteer a little bit of
Right.
time with every single week, just so you can get your feet wet on what it's
Mm.
like it being in sales, right? Because what you had in your mind about what the role and the position might be like could be different than everyday
Mhm.
reality. So I think it always makes sense to try it out and to have that story on your resume. So not only do you have the goal and the vision of making this happen, but employers can also see that you've taken proactive steps,
Mm.
tangible projects, and movements to actually make this happen.
I love that advice. I was just speaking to a young woman a couple of weeks ago who has spent a large portion of her career in biological life sciences as an analyst, going through tons of data and applying all of these data analysis tools to these different types of life science discoveries. But her passion lies in retail, fashion, consumer products. So we're trying to get that narrative towards all of her tremendous skills as a data analyst going through life sciences data, and how do we apply that now to analytics around fashion, around retail, around. And my advice to her was think of some projects, like you said, Vivian, like some projects that you could do on your own or volunteering for a small startup or
Yep.
something that starts to show that transition to the skills are there. You have all the data analysis
Yep.
skills, you have all of the data software skills. You just need to change the subject matter from life sciences to retail, fashion, where your sort of passion lies, right?
I would even argue that,
Mm.
this type of transition is so distinct and unique that it's
Mm.
actually, instead of seeing it as a disadvantage, it's actually an advantage
Interesting.
because it
Mm.
makes you stand out, right? Everyone's going to remember the retail expert who used to be in biological sciences, right? Like
Good
your
point.
story is so fascinating, or versus someone who grew up in the industry and has a very, linear story. There's
Right.
intrigue in, oh, what made you decide to do this? And it's a different perspective, and
Mm.
like always looking on the bright side of things, right? There's a silver lining to everything.
I
And
love
in
that.
this
Yeah.
case, turning something that could be perceived as a negative into an advantage for yourself to be more memorable.
Mm. I love the way you just said that. Makes her unique, makes her right, interesting, which
Yeah.
is really really cool. I don't know what units of measurement that you're looking at Rise right now, Vivian, but as we are coming into the second quarter of the year, and I can't believe where we are and how fast things are always moving. What are some of the significant milestones or ideas or just things that you are really excited about with Rise as we kind of continue to move through this year very quickly?
Yeah. So I think, you mentioned data and numbers. Even before, this podcast this morning, the first thing I did was look at all the dashboards. So, slice and dice the data. And, user growth,
Mm.
making sure that not only growth but retention, all these things are really important to
Yeah,
me.
sure.
But in addition to just looking at the data aspect of it, I think I'm always thinking about, given that the positioning of Rise is about pushing the envelope, about making this
Mhm.
process more joyful, making it more rewarding, right? Like, what else can we do that will truly stand out from the rest of the other players out there? And we have
Mm.
some very cool and exciting things coming that I think is going to make it feel like nothing else you've ever seen in this space.
Awesome.
It's funny
Awesome.
to today is April Fools, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of things that like we're thinking of like cheeky things here and there. You can add to the process to make you feel a little bit more alive and feel that the sort of triangulating that you're doing on company research, maybe you don't need to triangulate so much anymore because we'll bring all of that information in.
That's so cool.
Yeah, adding a little bit of whimsy here and there, so it just doesn't have to feel so dry and boring.
Well, I mean, just overall, I applaud you and thank you just because you're taking an event in people's lives that you, like you said, is an absolute necessity that is oftentimes filled with so much stress and wallow and just trying to make it better, right? Just trying to make it just a little bit better.
I think
And
I just come to the conclusion, even connecting the dots earlier about your students who's going from, the hard sciences to retail.
yeah,
I think I've always had a way of turning something that is negative, and I'm just realizing this,
yeah.
something negative into something positive, and looking on the bright side of things. Wow, I can't believe I just made this connection. So thank you.
Look at this. We're breaking barriers and bringing found new things. That's amazing. I just before we let you go, Vivian, I wanted to talk to you a little bit. You mentioned the AI economy for a second, and I would really love to get your take on sort of the future of work and this evolving job market. Um, how do you foresee some of this kind of playing out, Vivian? And of course, we know Rise will be right there playing a big role in it. But, from your sort of seat and the future of work, how do you see some of this playing out?
I think AI will become just like any other tool that we use
Mhm.
on a daily basis. No different than Microsoft Word,
Yeah.
Excel, PowerPoint. I like to give the story of, my mother, she's an accountant. And when she was an accountant in China, this is,
Uh-huh.
this is a real story. She used to use the abacus
Oh my
to,
gosh.
yeah, she literally to, check the accounts and do the credit and the debit. Like,
And she was probably so accurate all the time,
she's
I bet.
so fast
Yeah.
all the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
and an actual abacus. And then she migrated from the abacus to, a calculator to, like now the computer software and platforms. I think it's the same thing,
Yeah.
like AI is a tool to help humans be more efficient and to be there to facilitate what we can
Mm.
do faster, better, right? And there's a lot of fear around this new technology, and of course, we have to think about safeguards and privacy and all these things. But at the end of the day, it is a technological innovation that I
Mm.
believe will facilitate us in just like any other tools. Like I don't calculate things on the abacus anymore, right? And it doesn't mean that I'm any worse at math than my mom was at her age. I mean, she's probably better at mental math, but I'm
Right.
still able to do the same kind of calculations that she was able to do,
That's amazing.
just faster with a
Just faster.
hand.
Right. And I think it's so important what you just said about, all of these productivity tools seemed foreign or strange to us when they first came onto the scene 5, 10, 20 years ago. And I think that evolution that you're describing is going to be what we are going to experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, very good. Vivian, you're delightful. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so much for being here. Your stories are so enjoyable and full of passion, and we can see how much this all means to you and why you're doing what you are doing. We've been speaking with Vivian Chen, founder and CEO of Rise. Join rise.co, right? Is that correct?
That's right.
And thank you for your time. Good luck with everything. Good luck with the Chloe Capital cohort. Love to keep in touch if you're okay with that.
Of course.
Awesome, awesome, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Vivian. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.